The evening had just begun, but my heart was already racing faster than it should. I kept telling myself it was just another corporate event at my yoga studio, another night filled with polite laughter and small talk. But the moment I saw Marco walk through the door, tall and confident, it felt like the air around me shifted. He wasn't the boy I remembered from family barbecues anymore. No, tonight he carried himself like a man who knew exactly what he wanted. I tried to keep it together, smiling for the guests, moving from group to group, but I could feel his eyes following me, burning into my skin. He stayed just on the edge of the crowd, close enough to make sure I noticed him but far enough to keep it from looking obvious. Yet it was obvious, at least to me. My pulse refused to settle. Later, when most of the guests were caught up in a conversation near the catering table, I found myself alone in the back corner, rearranging chairs. Marco stepped in quietly behind me. I didn't even have time to turn before I felt his breath warm against my neck. I froze. Not a single word, but his nearness said it all. My breath caught in my throat, and for a split second, it felt like my entire body forgot how to move. His lips didn't touch me, not really, but they hovered just close enough to send a rush of heat up my spine. I wanted to step away, to laugh it off like some silly accident, but I couldn't. I stood there, frozen, as if my own will had betrayed me. Since that night at the studio, Marco found every excuse to stop by, claiming he wanted to help with client training, but I knew better because every time he walked in, my heart did that reckless little stutter as if it were dancing to a tune I never wanted to hear, yet somehow couldn't silence. He carried himself like he belonged there, moving through my studio with an easy confidence, adjusting equipment, offering coaching tips, always close enough for me to feel the pull between us, as if there were invisible threads tightening every second. I hated that my mind kept drifting to him during quiet moments, hated how I'd catch myself staring too long at the door, hoping to see his shadow, only to scold myself for acting like some foolish teenager with a hopeless crush. Over lunch at a cozy little cafe, I forced myself to laugh as Veronica gushed about her son's success, her words weaving a bittersweet knot in my chest, because I could barely meet her eyes. Later that night, just as I settled into bed, my phone lit up with Marco's message. "You looked so beautiful today, it was hard to even look at you," and my breath caught as if the walls of my safe little world had just shifted forever beneath me. The studio buzzed with noise from the unexpected corporate masterclass, laughter echoing off the walls while I did my best to stay focused. But my eyes kept darting toward Marco as if my mind had lost all sense of discipline and self-control. I told myself it was just another busy day, yet my hands trembled slightly as I carried a stack of yoga mats into the storage room, my breath quickening the moment I heard the door click softly behind me. Marco stepped inside with that familiar spark in his eyes, the air between us instantly thick with electricity, and before I could say a word or even think of moving away, his arms slid around my waist as naturally as if they belonged there, pulling me close enough to feel his heartbeat race against mine. Without thinking, my lips parted as his found mine in a kiss that sent a shockwave through my body, leaving no room for reason or resistance. The door creaked open suddenly and we sprang apart like guilty teenagers, fumbling for excuses while my heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the awkward laughter from the hallway. Though we escaped suspicion for now, the fear of discovery clung to me, sharp and undeniable, because I knew what we had just crossed was a line I could never uncross, and Marco's eyes told me he had no intention of stepping back. I kept telling myself to pull away from Marco, to create space before this dangerous game spiraled even further, but my body refused to listen, betraying me with every glance, every stolen moment when our eyes met across the studio, as if something stronger than reason had taken hold of me and refused to let go. Roberto, once so comfortably distant in his routines, began watching me with narrowed eyes, his questions growing sharper, his silent looks lingering just a second too long, as if he sensed a crack forming beneath the surface of our well-rehearsed life. Over coffee one morning, Veronica smiled brightly and mentioned how Marco had been quite taken with a certain young woman lately, her words innocent but slicing through me like a blade because deep down, I knew exactly who she meant and my chest tightened with a guilty ache. Back at home, I found myself frantically erasing Marco's messages as fast as they arrived, yet no matter how many I deleted, more kept lighting up my screen, his words reckless and insistent, pulling me deeper into a fire I could no longer smother. That afternoon felt like any other until Roberto showed up at the studio unannounced, catching me completely off guard, his usual calm replaced by an edge I couldn't quite place. as if he'd been turning something over in his mind and finally decided to act on it. I forced a smile and walked toward him, pretending my pulse wasn't galloping beneath my skin. But just as I did, Marco stepped out from behind the storage rack, too close, far too close, his fingers brushing the inside of my wrist in a touch that felt like fire dancing across my veins. Roberto's eyes locked onto the moment, sharp and unwavering, his face an unreadable mask. But the chill that spread through me was unmistakable as his gaze hardened into something distant and cold. He didn't speak, not then, not later, yet I felt the weight of his silence heavier than any accusation, a quiet verdict hanging between us. From that point on, I noticed him watching me more closely, subtle but relentless, as if he were gathering invisible pieces of a puzzle he already feared he understood, and every glance from him pressed harder on my chest, making it nearly impossible to breathe. No matter how hard I tried to convince myself to stop, Marco and I kept circling back to each other like moths drawn helplessly to a flame we knew would burn us both, and every stolen moment felt riskier, yet somehow more irresistible, as if the danger only fueled the pull between us. At home, Roberto's suspicion grew quieter but sharper, and I caught him one evening scrolling through my phone while I pretended to sleep, his breath held tight in his chest, but all he found was a clean slate because I had already erased every trace of Marco's messages with trembling fingers and a heart pounding in my ears. Oblivious to the storm brewing beneath our friendship, Veronica cheerfully suggested a weekend getaway for just the two of us, her excitement genuine and warm, her trust in me a silent knife twisting deeper as I forced a smile and agreed, all the while feeling like a traitor wearing a mask. Inside, my mind screamed to break free, to end whatever this had become before it swallowed me whole. Yet the deeper I sank, the harder it became to imagine a life without the fire Marco had lit within me, leaving me trapped in a silence that felt louder than any confession. The morning Roberto found the plain envelope waiting by our door, I watched him turn it over in his hands, his expression unreadable as he slipped the contents free and stared at the photographs that instantly drained the color from his face. Though he said nothing, not a word, just folded them back with eerie calm and set them aside like they meant nothing at all. His silence rattled me far more than any accusation could have because from that moment on he moved differently around me, his eyes colder, sharper, as if he had chosen to study me rather than confront me, turning our home into a quiet battleground where I felt watched with every breath I took. I sensed a shift, deep and unsettling, yet I couldn't fully grasp the weight of it, like standing beneath dark clouds and pretending it wouldn't rain. As if to fan the growing flames, Marco sent me a message later that evening, casual but heavy with temptation, suggesting we escape to a nearby town for just a day. Just us, just to breathe, he wrote, and I felt my resolve crack further under the unbearable strain of wanting what I should fear the most. Veronica had never been the type to snoop, but fate has a cruel way of twisting ordinary moments into something unforgettable, and when her son's phone buzzed loudly across the kitchen counter, curiosity lured her in like a whisper she couldn't resist, her fingers swiping across the screen with innocent intent until she stumbled upon the thread of messages that stole the breath from her chest. She didn't scream, didn't drop the phone in horror, but instead with an eerie calm that sent chills down my spine later when she would describe it, she sank slowly onto the nearest chair, her eyes wide and unblinking as she read each line between Marco and me, her mind desperately trying to stitch together a version of reality that didn't make her heart shatter. Instead of confronting me right away, she chose silence, carrying the unbearable weight of betrayal in her chest like a stone, watching me with eyes that now saw every hidden truth. Our friendship, once so steady, now dangled by a fragile thread, tension so thick between us it felt like the air itself could crack at any moment. Veronica's invitation to breakfast arrived like any other casual note between friends, warm in tone but carrying an undercurrent I couldn't quite place. And as I sat across from her at that too-quiet cafe table, my coffee untouched, I felt the walls closing in before she even spoke a single word. When she finally broke the silence, her voice was cold and steady, slicing through me without anger but with a chill that froze the blood in my veins, as she laid out every detail she had uncovered, each message between Marco and me recited like damning evidence in a trial I knew I couldn't win. My mouth opened but no defense came, no explanation could cover the shame that burned beneath my skin, and the silence between us thickened into something unbearable, something final. At home, Roberto packed his bag in grim silence, offering no speech, no accusations, only a brief glance that told me he had known for far longer than I realized. Later, Marco's message arrived like a match to dry kindling, pleading softly, "We can still have this if you're brave enough to want it." And against all logic, my heart hesitated. The house felt hollow without Roberto's quiet footsteps or Veronica's cheerful calls. And as I moved from room to room, every corner echoed with memories that now felt like sharp splinters under my skin, reminders of a life I had single-handedly unraveled with choices I could never take back. Days passed in a blur of gray hours, and even though I reached for my phone out of habit, Veronica's number stayed silent, her absence cutting deeper than any words of anger ever could, as if she had erased me from her life with the same finality I had once feared but now fully deserved. Roberto's decision arrived without fanfare, just a neatly folded set of divorce papers left on the kitchen counter, his signature a quiet farewell to a marriage I had long let slip through my fingers. Alone in my studio, I stared at the familiar walls that once brought me comfort, until the screen of my phone lit up with a single message from Marco, his words simple yet devastating, "Say just one word and I'll come," and I sat there frozen, realizing the choice was still mine to make.